What's up, everyone? It's Ashley. Welcome back to Ashley Talks Movies. So, I already did a review of Megalopolis a week or so ago, and this movie has generated so much buzz recently. Some good and a lot of it bad. But I wanted to do a deep dive discussion because when I did my review, I was kind of vague in certain things because I didn't want to do spoilers. But I feel like now I can talk spoilers. And so I invited my friend Felix along to talk about this movie, to go into a deep discussion on it. So, Felix, share with everyone a little bit about yourself before we dive into the discussion.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to join you for
Of
this.
course.
My name is Felix Albuerne Jr., and I have been reviewing movies more or less since about, I want to say, 2009, in a formal sense, like for a broadcast purpose. It was for a podcast originally, then it was for CBS Radio, and finally we did it a little bit when you and I worked together at Spectrum News, and right back to doing it independently. I took a long break after 2019, and right before the pandemic, but I got back into it this year, and now just shooting them on video instead of writing long-winded written reviews that nobody reads.
Yeah.
So it's more fun to do them in a video format.
Yeah, same here. I like doing the videos because you can just talk about it. And that's the beautiful thing is like you just naturally discuss movies like you would with your friends. You're just having a
Mhm.
conversation. So awesome. So Felix is here. We're going to talk about Megalopolis, Francis Ford Coppola's epic new movie that I didn't particularly like. And Felix, how did you feel about it? Because people who watch my channel have probably watched my review, but I want to get your overall sense of it first before we again get deeper into the movie.
It was really a unique experience, and let me kind of give a little context. The screening for the film that I was invited to was actually part of the film's debut at the New York Film Festival.
Mm.
And what they did, they simulcast a Q&A with Coppola, Robert De Niro, Spike Lee, um, right before the screening for the people assembled there, and that simulcast was sent out to about 65 different movie theaters around the country.
Mm.
So they had a
Okay.
very specific start time, and we listened to Coppola sort of talk about this film and what went into it, how he got it financed, what it meant to him personally, and then we got into the film. And I know I tried not to, but having the filmmaker sort of preface the film
Mm-hmm.
gave me a context to sort of look at it in retrospect. Now, all that said, I think one of the most important things I can say about experiencing that film is that for most of it, I felt like so much was going over my head.
Mm-hmm.
There was just so many things, like I'm missing something, right? He's referring to something here. I'm not in on the joke, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as well read as he is, so I'm missing something. Obviously, there are references that in the names of the characters to figures in Roman history.
Right.
I learned after the film, and while I was putting together my own review, I learned that there was a historical event during the Roman Republic known as the Catalina conspiracy,
Hmm.
where a man who recorded in the history books, his name is Catalina, attempted to overthrow Cicero and his fellow consuls,
Okay.
and was
Okay.
defeated and marched out of the city and later demonized in the history. And so Coppola decided, well, that's my starting point for this story. Let's take
Mm-hmm.
Catalina and say that maybe he wasn't the bad guy. Let's look at it from his point of view. And Cicero
Mm-hmm.
is the bad guy. Let's start there. That's his starting point. We're talking about obscure historical references. But
Mm-hmm.
then he's drawing on all these other theatrical traditions. I got a lot of Shakespeare. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
A lot of Shakespeare.
Caesar's first words to anybody after the short little prologue is Hamlet's to be or not to be speech.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
not just the
And it
first
says
couple of
it, it
lines.
says it verbatim
Yeah,
too.
I mean, it's like stanzas of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just gets more. sort of elevated erudite, from there. But
Mm-hmm.
I think all of that is one of the many things in that film that just sort of made it feel more remote, made it
Mm-hmm.
feel like, oh, he did not make this for me or for
Yeah.
anybody else in this audience. He made it for his peers.
Himself.
He made it for himself. Yes, and obviously that goes into it too, right? He's been
Yeah.
thinking about this movie since the 80s. De
Mm-hmm.
Niro read for Caesar in the
Mm-hmm.
80s.
Mm-hmm.
And so he made it for himself, yes, but he made it for his peers. And he said it. He said it during that little Q&A at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
He truly believes that he raised his fist in the air and says, "We have to have a great debate about the future." And then later,
Which
when
I agree
Caesar
with,
says
but
that in his monologue at the end,
yeah.
it's like, oh my God. So Caesar is his mouthpiece. He's not even
Yeah.
a character. He's
Yeah.
Coppola's mouthpiece for this
Mm-hmm.
message, this very humanist message. This
Yeah.
message about this belief that humanity can solve any problem that it
Mm-hmm.
puts its collective mind to, as long as it's not bogged down and distracted by all of the petty little things that tend to distract and keep us from making any progress,
Yeah.
pursuing personal power, lust, greed, all that other fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, I look at that, I look at the film, and I feel like that there's such a positive message somewhere
Very
in
deep
there.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes it's buried deep. Sometimes he's beating you over the head with it.
That's
You
true.
know,
That's one of the things I noticed in the movie where it's like some things are kind of subtle and other
hmm
things are not at all.
not at all,
Yeah.
including that ending.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
and he gave it a happy ending,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's the the pragmatist, but the pragmatist old man, but corrupted by the current day, and the
Mm-hmm.
visionary futurist who cares nothing for the cares of the present. They shook hands and they
Mm-hmm.
found a way forward.
Yeah.
And that's his great hope.
Yeah.
That's what he's trying to express in this film. So yeah, that part ain't subtle at all.
No.
Also, that love scene between Aubrey Plaza and Shia LaBeouf. Can we call it a love scene? No, it was just gross, right?
Yeah, that was
It's
just
just
very
gross.
weird
Yeah.
among many weird things. Like it's one of those things where like it didn't seem to fit in the movie, but then also like how ridiculous it was fit within the movie. Like the tone of it fit, but like that
Yes, Auntie
itself didn't
Wow.
fit.
Yes,
Oh
please, Auntie
no,
Wow.
no. I
It's
mean,
gross.
her name, the character's name to begin with, Wow
Yes.
Platinum, was
Wow,
just
Platinum. But I wrote it. I wrote it in my Substack piece. I really one of the ways that I chose to look at it was that these were all of those characters were allegorical representations of different parts of the human experience.
mm-hmm,
Everyone around Caesar, even Caesar himself. If Caesar represents inspiration,
mm-hmm,
then Wow represented avarice and lust,
mm-hmm,
and Claudio, Shia LaBeouf's character, that's envy and insecurity.
mm-hmm,
And Cicero, Giancarlo Esposito's character, the old mayor, that's fear. That's fear of the future. That's
mm-hmm,
fear of the unknown. That's fear of what's to come. So
mm-hmm.
all of these things, and that love sexy, whatever that was, I think of that symbolically as those forces conspiring, working
Mm-hmm.
together to hold back human progress in the
Mm-hmm.
most unholy and disgusting way possible.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think there are, don't get me wrong. I mean, I didn't like the movie, but I
yeah,
do think it has some very interesting layers to it.
hmm
All the things you mentioned, the metaphors and references to Shakespeare and to history. There's a lot there, but I also feel like so much of it got lost in all the other things. Like there's so much of this movie that doesn't work. And I think one of the things that doesn't work, for me at least, was how tonally all over the place it was. Like it was just
Mhm.
this mishmash of tones. I don't know if that's one of the things that you felt or saw with the movie, but that was one of the things that really, for me, I was like, I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to feel about this movie, because there were so many like unintentionally funny moments. Like people on my screen were laughing at things that I'm pretty sure it wasn't meant for them to laugh at.
They're not. It's not supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
I know. I did pick up on that, certainly, and it was like I remember an experience in grad school, in sort of contemporary literatures, where one of my professors was talking about learning how to, quote, read a text, right? You pick up a
Mm-hmm.
book for the first time from an author you've never read before, and they have a particular way of expressing themselves, and sometimes it can be very foreign to what you're used to. So it takes a while to understand how to read the text so that you're
Mm-hmm.
getting something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm sitting there watching this in its opening minutes, and I'm watching the way that the characters talk to one another,
Mm-hmm.
just talk. Obviously, this is not the way that real people talk to one
Right.
another.
Right.
It's very over the top. It's very melodramatic.
Mm-hmm.
And then I
Much like a
realized, or no,
play.
yeah, a
Yeah.
stage play,
Mm-hmm.
but also like a fable.
Mm-hmm.
Because and the subtitle of the movie is "This is a Fable." So
Yeah.
there's the license. There's where he gives himself the license to say, no, this isn't reality.
Mm-hmm.
This is a story, and so people are going to act in ways that are not normal in our. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
again, delivering the entire to be or not to be dialogue in the middle of a political presentation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I that was one of those things where once I kind of locked that in, okay, that's why these people sound the way they do and what they're doing. I never figured out why he felt the need, or it's a dramatic device within the film, but
Mm-hmm.
it serves very little purpose outside of being almost a MacGuffin, is the ability to stop time. That whole
Oh
business
yeah.
that Caesar can
I
do.
was I
You
was
know, it's like,
literally going to mention that next. Is like that didn't work either, because it when it's introduced, it seems like it's going to be something that's really important to the
yes.
movie, right? You're talking about the future, you're talking about someone who can build things, and then they have this ability. You're like, okay, this is going to play like a big role in this, and then it's just sort of an
Yeah,
afterthought.
he loses it. He loses it for about 10 minutes, and
Yeah.
then he realizes that she's suddenly the muse, and he gets it back, and oh, okay, everything's fine again.
Mm-hmm.
And they never explain why he has it. They never
Yeah.
explain,
Yeah.
does anybody else have this ability? Clearly. Does anyone even aware that he can do this? No, actually, they did explain that because Julia can see him do it, but nobody
Oh,
else has
right.
ever been
Right.
able
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
him do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, they provide some, that's what, because he's very dismissive of her, right, at the start,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
until she
Mm-hmm.
says that she saw him do it. And then, you're interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, and credit to, performances.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked Giancarlo Esposito in this,
Mm-hmm.
especially the role that he was playing, and he just brings this calm gravity to these
Mm-hmm.
absurd proceedings that are going on around him,
Yeah.
and he plays. It's a sad figure.
Mm-hmm.
Sad because he's so stuck. Sad because he's so afraid. Sad
Of
because he thinks
progress and
he's so
change,
right.
and
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And sad the lengths that he goes to hold on to his family when he feels like he's losing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I like Natalie Emmanuel in
Mm-hmm.
this, and her performance was relatively grounded.
Yeah.
She wasn't
Yeah.
as over the
Over.
top.
Right.
It's really Adam Driver and Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah.
And Shia LaBeouf, that he's the one that just to me was a pure Shakespearean villain. Just
Yeah.
somebody cut from the same cloth as Iago or Richard III or Don John from
Mm-hmm.
Much Ado About Nothing, or one of those figures, the Merchant of Venice. Just somebody
Mm-hmm.
who is all, oh, I hate him so much. I'm so
Yeah.
jealous.
Yeah.
And
And fueled
scheming
by
and
anger and
yeah,
resentment and Yeah.
resentment and feelings of inferiority, right? It all
Hmm.
boiled down to Daddy doesn't love me as much as he loves my cousin. So
But I will
that's
say,
interesting.
yeah, but and also I would say like this cast is stacked, and that was one
Yeah.
of the things I was like, okay, wow, this movie is probably going to be amazing because you've got this like great cast, and then you have Adam Driver and Shia. They're doing. I think the two of them have like similar performances. Like they seem to be operating on the same kind of level, and then you have some of the other characters are doing. They're like in a different movie. It felt like for me, and then you had like Dustin Hoffman, who is
Taking a
just
paycheck.
there.
Just taking a
Just
paycheck,
there.
honestly.
Like, what is
Just,
Dustin
an
Hoffman
opportunity to work with
doing?
Coppola. Yeah, this no.
I
I
guess.
would
I
put
mean,
I would add
yeah.
Aubrey Plaza to that trio, that trio, to make it a trio of Driver
Oh, like
and
being
Shia
like, yeah,
LaBeouf.
kind of over the
Yeah,
top and yeah.
yeah, yeah. I would add Wow Platinum definitely to that trio. But the others, yeah. And I just honestly I feel like Coppola paid the most attention to the three of them in
Hmm.
terms of direction, and the rest of them,
Well, their
like I think,
characters have the most to do as well, like
right,
to
right.
drive this kind of disjointed narrative along. But yeah, they're the main forces at play there.
Sure, they're the catalysts for what's happening. Everyone else is just sort of reacting to
Hmm.
what's happening.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've hit on it a couple of times. There was so much going on for a 2 hour and 18 minute film. I'm sure he could have put this together for 6 hours if he wanted to. Um,
Probably.
but but but
I wouldn't have wanted
there
to
was so
watch
much going on
that.
that he couldn't focus on any one thing
Yeah,
enough to develop it, to give it any real emotional oomph. Because
yeah,
I'm sitting there at the end of it, I'm just like, okay, yeah, great.
yeah. I mean, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where there's a lot of different like interesting ideas within the story, but again,
Yes.
they kind of get lost. One of the things I said in my review is that I felt like the story was almost as if it was taken out of a notebook that Coppola had when he was coming up with the idea for this movie. And
Hmm.
he would write down a thought like, "Ooh, what if I had this character do this?" Or like, "What if like Caesar can stop time?" And like da da da. And then it was just that. It was like all these different ideas that he had jotted down, none fully fleshed out, and that was just put together in this movie where it's like, okay, you've introduced this interesting idea here, and then there's no follow up later on in the movie. Like it's just kind of presented and then goes away. Like again, the whole like Caesar can stop time. It's like, okay, that's interesting, and maybe that should play a bigger role in the movie, but it's never developed. It's just sort of like, yeah, he
Yeah.
can do this, and like that's it. Just
And they come back to it whenever they need to, but it
yeah,
doesn't,
like
it
it's a
doesn't,
convenience. Yeah, but
yeah,
it's yeah,
it,
yeah.
it's how he does his job.
Hmm.
But, so what?
Yeah.
I think it was interesting. You almost forget the whole plot device of the Russian satellite that falls out of orbit and
Oh yeah.
creates a crater in the middle of New Rome, right?
Yeah.
They have that right in one of the opening shots. They
Hmm.
leave it dangling there. You have the
And then
news
they have like a
report.
newspaper. Yeah, the newspaper
Yeah,
thing shows up with the headline. Yeah, and then
yeah,
it's
and suddenly, oh, there we go, and that sort of opens a new door. And I have a feeling, just talking about the notebook idea that you said, that Coppola is just jotting down story ideas that he wants to use in this. Sometime probably after 9/11, he jotted
mhm,
down something about a great disaster that leaves a crater in the middle of New Rome, and
mhm.
who is going to control what gets built there? How do we
Yeah,
rebuild after that tragedy?
yeah. Or
And
even
how do all
since
these
he's
conflicting forces? Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
well, even since he was developing this since the '80s,
Yeah,
I could see the Russian connection there.
yeah.
Um, even with like this is an idea he had back at the early beginnings of this thought, and they just was a holdover. Like I don't know. It's
I
yeah, it's just strange.
I want to say I thought of this while I was watching the film. I didn't mention it in my reviews, but it's coming to
Hmm.
mind just because of the train of our conversation. there were certain elements of the film, the way that unfolds, that reminded me of the Watchmen film, not the HBO
Mm.
series, but the
Mhm.
Snyder
Mhm.
film,
Mhm.
right? And the Snyder film itself is a sort of faithful adaptation of the
Mhm.
graphic novel until you get to the end.
Mhm.
Because at the end,
Mhm.
no, you don't have a giant space octopus monster
Mhm.
attacking the
Mhm.
planet. You had
Mhm.
something else they doing
Mhm.
because they didn't want to. But when you think about the alternate reality, instead of, it's alternate reality 1980s, alternate
Mhm.
future sort of
Mhm.
thing. So you have that here. Um, you have a great disaster that
Mhm.
makes up a big part of the film, and you have a sex scene that basically just makes the audience uncomfortable. Um,
Yeah.
that was something else. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
neither Snyder nor Coppola can, or maybe they can. They just chose to make this uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's tough to call this. It's not dystopian. I've seen a
No.
couple of
No.
reviews and descriptions of the film. They call it sci-fi, but it's not dystopian. Whereas Watchmen
No.
certainly is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
there are some other things that, whether intended or not, they just sort of parallel. And I came away from that Watchmen film similarly dissatisfied and unimpressed.
Mhm.
That's not my favorite Snyder film by far. But
Yeah. And it's interesting because, with this movie, you have, Francis Ford Coppola directing
hmm,
it, got this huge cast, and it has a huge budget. um, and I was, expecting more. I mean,
hmm,
there's some good set pieces in the
yes,
movie. Production design is good, but then there's this like really bad CGI that they're using, and I guess it was intentional, right? Because it's supposed to be like a fantasy. Um, but I just found it distracting, especially in certain scenes where it's like the whole backdrop just looks like a green screen. You know what I mean?
when the vision doesn't translate. I mean, if it
Yeah.
was intentional for those effects to look unreal,
Hmm.
then that's going to be lost on most audiences, I think.
Yes.
I just, I
Well,
did
especially because
like
the
that.
audiences nowadays with like the type of technology we have, right? Like
Yes.
maybe that would have worked in the 80s or 90s, right? That sort of overly artificial look, right? To create like a fantasy.
Mhm.
But in the age of like, video game graphics now and even other movies, like it just to me it just was distracting. It didn't translate for me, like, okay, this you're intentionally doing this to create this illusion of this other world, right?
Mhm.
This fantasy there. I was just like, oh gosh, this for the money you've spent on this movie, why is the CGI so bad?
And I think this sort of helps us circle back to something we mentioned, earlier about who is he making this for.
Hmm.
I,
Hmm.
I, I want to give some credit to I don't read very many film reviewers anymore, mainly because I'm always paranoid that if I read somebody else's work and then I see a film, my
Oh, it's gonna
perception
have a
is going to be
bias.
color
Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
Um, but Sonny Bunch is a film reviewer who writes for the Bulwark on Substack,
Hmm.
and he described in Megalopolis a rejection of populism,
Mm. Hmm.
populism in filmmaking, and to me, what that means is that Coppola is fully aware of what audiences want in their movies these days,
Hmm.
whether it's realism in CGI or easy plot lines or whatever easily digestible film. He knows exactly what audiences want, and
He's
he
just not
chose
gonna give it to you.
specifically not to give it to them. Yes,
Yeah.
because I'm going to tell my story and I'm going to get my message out the way that I want to. And there's an implicit challenge there to the audience. Meet me on my level. Step
Hmm.
up your game and meet me on my level.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, when you come off arrogant and superior like that,
Hmm.
when you say that I know what you want and I'm not going to give it to you,
Hmm.
then most people are turned off and say, F you, I'm going to watch something else. You know,
Yeah, I mean, and like film is art, and a
yes,
lot of this movie is abstract, and so I get that. Like
yeah,
I don't have to understand every single thing in a movie. I don't have to understand every single metaphor or all the symbolism. But yeah, a lot of this movie felt very much like you were just saying, where it was like I'm highly superior, and I'm going to do this. And if you don't understand it, then you just don't understand art. You just don't
yeah.
understand film. And it's like, but then you clearly only made it for yourself, because otherwise, if you're making a movie and other people can't understand it, can't relate to it, can't pull something out of it, then did it succeed? Like
Well,
what was
clearly
the
it doesn't. If
intention?
your
No.
idea is to inspire people to have the great debate about the future, but nobody gets the message,
Nobody and
then
nobody can.
clearly you
Yeah,
failed.
nobody
Yeah.
can participate in the debate. Yeah,
Yes. Nobody's going to be inspired or participate in
yes,
the debate because your inspirational message came off like a "I'm smarter than you" sort of
yes.
thing. And when you first asked me to
Hmm.
do this, I was thinking about what things we might talk about or where the
Hmm.
conversation might lead. I was reminded of another movie that came out earlier this year that was also an art piece,
Mm.
also something that was made with a sort of implicit rejection of populism, uh, in the sense that the comedy in it is so black that
Hmm.
you're not even laughing. You're just like, oh my God, that's really sick. Yorgos Lanthimos's Two Kinds of Kindness with Emma Stone.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did you
Yes,
see that one?
yes, I did.
Yes, you
Hmm.
did. Yeah, and that film, yeah, that was another one where we walked out scratching our heads. Just
Hmm.
and I saw that one with Mel, and she just looked at me afterwards and said, "Good luck reviewing that. What are you going to say
Have
about
fun.
that? Have
Yeah.
fun, and but it's another piece. Now, the Lanthimos film is much more effective than
Hmm.
Megalopolis. I think it's
Hmm.
much more focused, even though there's a lot
Well, yeah,
going
the
on.
narrative is a
Yeah,
little bit more focused. I think that was my one of
yes,
my big problems with Megalopolis is like there are pieces there,
yeah,
but they don't all come together, right? And so it's just
yeah.
kind of it's like all over the place.
It's
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 like
all
we
over
were
the
having a
place.
conversation and suddenly I start talking about I don't know, like a vacation or something. You're like, okay, right, but let's talk about this movie, and then let me talk about dinner last night. Like, yes, those things are interesting maybe on their own, but like they're not making sense together.
Focus.
Yeah.
Whereas Kinds of Kindness, three stories within one film, but each one hyper focused
Hmm.
on getting its message across and telling it. Those are I think those are he even referred to those I think as parables. He didn't use
Mm-hmm.
fable. He
Hmm.
used the word parable when
Hmm.
describing those things. And the performances were just, I mean, I came away from that convinced even more that there's nothing Emma Stone can't do.
Hmm.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
still one thing Emma Stone cannot do. She cannot convincingly portray a Hawaiian
Oh.
um, from
Yes.
Aloha. She still can't do that.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
but other than that, sky's the limit. She can do
Yes.
whatever she wants.
Yeah.
Um, but I was again a piece of a film that leaves so much to the viewer's interpretation, so much as art
Hmm.
and abstract. And what are you going to take out of this? Because the filmmaker refuses to spell it all out for you,
Hmm.
right? Um, Whereas in Megalopolis, because it's so diffuse and scattered, there's
Hmm.
lots of things that we can talk about, like what was he doing there? But then at the very end, we know exactly what he's doing. He's getting up in your face and saying, "Stop being apathetic. We need to get off our asses and do something, or else we're going to lose our democracy. We're going to lose our
Yeah.
our way."
Yeah. And
Um,
well, and I think there's so many parts of this movie that you could take out to like, trim down that runtime, and you could still get that message across quicker,
oh,
more
absolutely,
effectively. It's just like
yes,
I just felt like
absolutely,
so many of these scenes just felt so unnecessary. Like they would cut to something would happen and then would cut to another scene. I was like, what was the point of that?
well, there was
Why am I watching this? Why are you showing me
there was the
this?
whole sequence at the Coliseum, right? Madison Square
Oh,
Garden. and the
Gosh.
scandal with the Vestal Virgin.
Yes,
I mean,
that was it was one of those things where it's like, okay, we were talking about earlier, like hitting you over the head with
yes,
metaphors and references. You have the Colosseum, they have the chariots.
yep, yep.
New Rome. New Rome. They have the
And,
chariots
and,
around.
and wrestling
Yes.
at the garden, but it's Roman wrestling, it's
Yes.
Greco-Roman wrestling.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
but
but
that whole sequence, that one played on way too long,
yeah,
and that one was also very strange. Like, I kind of got what Coppola was saying there, but also was like, it was a little
because
icky. It was a little icky
he
with.
and that one scene, that one set piece, it introduces the family dynamic
Hmm.
of, with Crassus, with Caesar and Claudio, but it's also Claudio setting a plot in motion. It's
Hmm.
also Caesar like getting dragged out and beat up. There's so many things going on
Hmm.
just to move the narrative forward to, oh, there's a scandal. He slept with the Vestal Virgin. Oh my God, he's awful. And
Yeah.
then, like 5 minutes later, oh, the footage was fake. That's over. Forget it.
Yeah.
Claudio's plot failed. Okay, moving
Yeah.
on. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So much buildup for so little payoff to anything.
no
Like,
payoff.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have like Dustin Hoffman's there, and he literally just points out
Yeah, let
obvious
me take
things. And
care
that's
of
it.
this for you.
Yeah. That he's doing nothing. Yeah. And that makes me think of just the dialogue in this movie, too,
Mm.
was pretty bad. Like, I couldn't believe, like, I don't know if it was just the dialogue or the line reading. I think it was a little bit of both. But yeah, there's just the dialogue. I'm thinking of that one scene with like Caesar and Julia where like they're talking and they keep repeating the lines over and over again. What was it that she said? Oh, it was
Were they up on the skyscraper? Were they up on the
no, it was when they were
girders?
in his
Uh,
office and
Oh,
it was
it's the first meeting. Yeah, it's
yeah.
before. Yeah, okay.
What was it she was saying? I
Hmm.
can't even think. I saw like a meme earlier today about it because it made me think of it. I can't remember what she says now, but it was like kept repeating, and I was like, okay, we get it. Like you've said this like 4 times now, just to say it multiple times. Like it seemed like it had a purpose, right? You could have said it once and it would have had its impact. It didn't need to be said like 5 times.
And again, we're going back to the line reading again. I thought when Driver is delivering those lines and he's overacting, I
Mm-hmm.
really think he was deliberately coached to do it
Mm-hmm.
that way.
Oh yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's how it sounds in Coppola's mind.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the others, I don't get it all. Although, okay, in the third act, if what we can call the third act of the film,
Yeah.
where Shia LaBeouf's character, sort of takes on and is actually, I think he's truly channeling MAGA politicians. When he gets out in front of the crowd that's so mad that their neighborhood's being torn down, and he takes the
Oh
megaphone,
yeah,
I
yeah.
see you, I see you, I hear
Mm-hmm.
you. You know, um,
Yes, like a true
culture for the
politician.
masses, culture for the masses. He's deliberately a very fake populist message delivered to a desperate people that he wants to use their rage to his own ends. You
Mm-hmm.
know, his line reads there. He is deliberately channeling what we are seeing in our world around us. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how much he was coached to do that. Maybe that's something that Coppola wanted to do, or maybe he brought that to the table
To
himself.
himself, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
But
and Coppola, during his little Q&A, he was so proud of himself. This is the arrogance. He was so proud of himself that he, as a show of unity, he
Mhm.
chose specifically to work with performers who have been canceled. Who
Oh
people who,
yeah,
yeah,
if you think
he
about it, yeah, John
he
Voight
said,
and
John Voight is a Republican. I don't agree with him politically, but I brought him in to work on this movie. And Shia's, he's been canceled by various things. he brought these people in specifically as a message to show we can all work together towards a common goal. And I'm like, yeah, dude, but
I mean,
I
it's
mean,
like you would
you're making a
hope
show
that,
of it, you know?
well, yeah, but also you would hope that would be the case, but also like depending on the severity of what that person did,
Yeah,
it's like you might not want to be near them or around them or work with them, especially if they haven't learned a lesson
sure,
from whatever, you know.
sure.
So it's like, yeah, you would love a world where like if someone made a mistake or did something wrong, or if people, you know, that you could eventually, if one comes around, it's like, look, we can all get along, we can all work together, it's just this harmony, we're great. Yeah, but
But
in
as you say,
reality that's usually not the case, you know.
it's the severity of what they've done,
Yeah.
and whether or not, you know, there is real contrition. And who knows with anybody,
Yeah.
you know, or is it all an act, or has it truly been a turnaround? Now, you know, I think Coppola, being the optimist that he is, would like to believe that, you know, everyone it deserves that regardless. You know, okay, if that's what you believe, then more power to you. Unfortunately, you know, I don't think I'm that optimistic anymore. I may have been that positive,
Many years
you know,
ago.
20 years ago. Yeah, but not so much anymore. Now, that said, I don't want to be. I sometimes point this out. I never want to be judged at the end of my days. I don't want to be judged for my worst moment.
True.
Because
Yeah.
you never know what is happening to a person in any given time or place. And they make a mistake. You know, Lord knows I've made tons of them. I continue to make them. You know, if that one thing, you know, depending on what it is, overshadows all the good that you've done, then it's sad. It's sad. Now, you know, but again, it's a case by case basis.
Yeah.
Nobody's rushing to forgive Kevin Spacey. Okay.
Right. Harvey Weinstein.
Nobody, Harvey Weinstein. Nobody is, because for one thing, the trauma that they inflicted over many, many years has never been fully owned up to, one. And two, you know, we don't have any sense that they're truly, you know, they're any different now. They're just out of the public spotlight where they deserve to be. So I don't know how we ended up on this topic, but because we're definitely not talking about the movie anymore. We were talking about Coppola working with people who are certainly out of favor in Hollywood.
Yes. And the public. I mean, in some ways.
In the public. I mean, I'm surprised that Tobey Maguire didn't show up somewhere in that movie.
Well, it's funny because, like, as you were talking, I was thinking about other people who were in the movie, not necessarily people who had been, you know, canceled.
Yeah.
But it's just, there's so many people in this movie, and so many of them are not doing anything. Like Jason Schwartzman is in the movie. Yeah, I just thought
he just wanted to read a Coppola movie. I just want to be here. You don't even have to pay me. I just want to follow around
Giancarlo Esposito in the background. Yeah. Lawrence Fishburne's in this movie, and he's like sort of the narrator too.
Yes.
I usually always enjoy him, but like his role, I mean, he does have a significantly, you know, bigger role than like Dustin Hoffman or Jason Schwartzman. But even then, his role is kind of like he shows up. He narrates some parts. He looks a little angry.
He's leading the classical theater chorus.
Yeah.
You know, he is moving us from scene to scene. That's, you know, calling back to classical theater as opposed to Shakespeare. You have that omnipresent narrator who knows what everyone's thinking and feeling. But then every once in a while participates in the action, but is still withdrawn enough to look at it dispassionately.
Yeah. But. I kind of wonder now what Coppola thinks because, you know, now that the movie's out and it's kind of, it's flopped at the box office.
It's bombed. Absolutely.
It's bombed completely. And it's interesting because like he put up so much of his own money to make this movie because it was a passion project. And I guess he couldn't get a studio to sign off on it. I understand why. If I was an executive at a studio and I was in charge of the money, and even if it was Francis Ford Coppola coming to me and said, "Hey, I need however many millions of dollars to make this movie," I would have said no too. Um, yeah, I just wonder. He probably doesn't care. I
Well,
don't
you know
know.
what? I don't know how much it bothers him because
Yeah.
he just sold part of a winery, to make it to make it a bunch of money
If only,
enough to
yeah, yeah.
secure a loan of $120 million
Hmm.
to make a movie and to make a movie with this message that he wanted to get out there. And whether people see it or not see it, yeah, I can't control that, but I got my message out there.
I
Who
mean, if
cares about the
only I
money?
could have that much money to make a movie with
Sure.
what I wanted. That would be the
The
dream,
only
I guess.
people who can say, the money doesn't matter are people who've never had that, or people who've always had that kind of money,
Yeah.
or who had it for a long time. It's that I just badly butchered it, but it's that great line from the first season of The Boys, that A Train
Oh.
delivers.
Hmm.
This is the only people who say that money isn't everything are people who've always had it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Coppola has been flush with cash for a long, long, long time.
Hmm.
And, with between his family and the wineries and all the other businesses. So yeah, I can sell part of a winery and I can secure funding for this much money and I can make the movie I want to make. And whether people see it or not, I don't care.
Hmm.
Maybe the folks at Lionsgate who paid for the distribution rights, maybe they're a little pissed
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe they're wondering what the heck were we thinking?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if anything, Coppola maybe is thinking, why aren't they listening? Why
Maybe.
didn't my
Yeah.
message
Why
get
did they?
across?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Maybe that's
maybe
his
that's it. I
response.
don't know.
I don't know. But
I
yeah, it
don't know
is
the man.
it I don't either. I don't.
I
Um
don't,
we don't. Um but yeah, I do wonder about that because there have been, so many movies coming out lately and some of them have resonated and then others haven't. And I think Megalopolis was one of those that it just didn't resonate.
well, you had the opportunity. You said you got to see The Wild Robot, which came out on the
I
same
did.
weekend, and you
Yes.
said that was awesome.
Yes. And
And
it was
I
funny
and
because
I
I
told
saw I saw Megalopolis and then, I went home, put together my review for it. And then the next day I went and saw Wild Robot and I was like, wow, this is like a breath of fresh air because this movie is just
yes,
so poignant and beautiful and the animation is great and the story is great and it's told well and it was just like, okay, this is what I needed. And it has a
palate cleanser.
powerful message as well, very
Yes.
human message that anyone can, kids can understand this movie. Adults can appreciate it too. It has a complexity. And I'm like, I get you want to be abstract, with Megalopolis. That's fine. But I mean, I just feel like there's a missed opportunity
Yes.
to reach a wider audience with whatever message you were really trying to get across, for the sake of, well, it's totally my vision. It's one of those things. I think I mentioned this to you when I was asking if you wanted to come on to the channel to talk about it, where I was like, it's one thing where you have a director, they have a vision, and they're trusted to do whatever they need to do for the movie. But you always, usually, sometimes, not always, but sometimes you have that like sort of checks and balances where like someone can say, maybe that's a little too much, or maybe there's not enough of this, and there can be like a little bit of like a restraint there. But clearly, Coppola, funded this himself, so it was whatever he wanted,
Yeah.
unopposed. And I don't know if that's always the best thing. I mean, yeah, it's
Oh, I
completely
think
his
it's
vision.
rarely the best thing.
I mean,
It's
it's completely
rarely.
his vision.
Yeah.
Whatever art, it's like this is the artist and this is his art, unabated. But
Yeah.
you're like, I don't know, I don't get most of it. So
and neither did a lot of other people.
yeah.
Who was it? Somebody said one. Nobody edits Stephen King anymore.
Hmm.
Nobody edits J.K. Rowling anymore. Not that she's
Hmm.
writing much anymore, but
Hmm.
you get to a certain point in a certain stature where you're selling on the name alone, and so nobody's going to edit you. They just want the
Or question
content so they
you.
can
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
question you. Yeah, they just want the content from you so they can sell it and make some money off of it, and you
Hmm.
can make some money too. Um, And I certainly think that that Coppola has that stature.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of our old coworkers, Chris Boyd,
Mm-hmm.
the assignment desk at Bay News 9, who's a filmmaker himself,
Mm-hmm.
right? He commented on my review link recently, and he pointed out, modern Coppola is different than classic Coppola. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something filmmakers, they do
They change,
change
yeah, over years of
over
experience
time,
and
over
yeah, yeah.
decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ridley Scott now versus Ridley Scott 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They're very different films in terms of
Mm-hmm.
style.
Mm-hmm.
Scorsese, all of them,
Mm-hmm.
Ron Howard, I don't want to put Ron Howard in the same echelon, but, people who've been making movies for a very, very long time, their style
Mm-hmm.
does evolve, does
Mm-hmm.
change.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me very curious, looking forward to November about Ridley Scott returning to Gladiator. And
Yes.
we're 24 years removed,
Mm-hmm.
25 years removed from that original film, and
Mm-hmm.
how much has his style changed? But going back to these characters and this place, how much are
Mm-hmm.
we going to try to evoke the old film, or are we going to go in a different direction? I know
Yeah,
that certain
exactly.
characters are related. Whatnot. We've seen that in the marketing, but he's a different filmmaker now than he was then,
Mm-hmm.
and he's had a couple of things that really didn't work since
Mm-hmm.
then.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we going to get? Just
Yeah.
because the filmmaker has aged, and and some people can say that
And
the
audiences have
industry leaves people
changed too.
behind. Yeah,
Yeah.
audiences have changed a great deal too.
Yeah.
One that comes to mind, um, both Cameron Crowe and Rob Reiner, who
Mm-hmm.
made these films that we consider to be iconic, in the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s. But
Mm-hmm.
their most recent films seem to indicate that maybe, audiences and filmmaking has sort
So
of
it
left them
doesn't,
behind.
yeah, doesn't resonate
Their
with them.
styles
Yeah.
feel quaint, right? They
Mm-hmm.
haven't evolved.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, some of the other, they have evolved, but they've evolved into something that isn't as palatable. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be interesting.
It's an interesting discussion, and that's why I like talking about movies. Because
Me
it's like
too.
we watch them, and then we have all these ideas about them, and it's always great. Well, Felix, I definitely appreciate you coming on and talking about Megalopolis with me. I will definitely have to have you on again. Maybe we can talk about Joker too. That would be a fun one to
That was
dive a
my
little
review
deeper
this
in.
past week. Yep,
Yeah, I saw
I'd be happy to.
it too.
Yeah, once you see that, if you want to have me on, but I really appreciate the offer. It's been a really fun discussion, and I'd love to come back.
Yes. So before we go, tell people where they can find you, follow you, if they want to check out your movie reviews.
Yes. The best way to follow is the Substack, and the address for that, to find that, if you're on the Substack app or if you go to Substack.com, is F as in Frank, B as in boy, unplugged, fbunplugged.substack.com. You can subscribe for free, and I usually have one post a week. It's the one review a week. The reviews are 5 minutes tops, 5 minutes out of your day. I also have the channel on YouTube, which is
Mm-hmm.
just the videos if you want to subscribe there. But the Substack posts have additional commentary, notes that I couldn't fit in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
If this hour tells you anything, you people who don't know me or haven't talked to me, I'm long-winded. I usually go on for more than 5 minutes. There's more to say. So,
Which is
I'll
why
put
I
that
wanted
in
to
the
have you
Substack.
on. I was like, oh, if I want to have a deeper discussion, I know who to call.
So, yep, I'm going to have loads, blow hard. So, yeah, follow the Substack, follow the YouTube channel if you choose. There's also, I do have a TikTok. I do have a TikTok, I should say, but the movie content there is tough. The
Oh,
TikTok
okay.
is very stringent about, if you show still images from the film, and they think that
Oh,
you're
okay.
ripping it off, and they take it
Okay.
down. So, just follow TikTok if you want stupid stuff. If you want the movie reviews, Substack and YouTube.
Cool. Okay. And I'll include links to those in the description so that people can
Thank you
find
so
them.
much.
You're welcome. All right. So everyone, thank you for joining us for Megalopolis discussion. As always, to like, comment, and of course, subscribe, and also jump into the comments and share your thoughts about Megalopolis. Because, we did talk spoilers and things. You can talk as much as you want about the movie and not fear that you're going to ruin it for someone. But anyway, thank you again, Felix, for joining me, and I'll see you all next time.